sadly and wrongly, there's quite the deepest in the rich world poverty in America. So there's certainly a segment of the population that is low, where no other rich country in the world allows any of its people, not even its beggars, to reach. So I want to give them an attention. However, among those who have some opportunity to invest in something or to have their Social Security or their retirement funds invested in the stock market or what have you, it's a tiny, including myself, it's a tiny proportion. And here's that focus I kept, and thank you for allowing me to stress why I was adamant about it. My concern in this talk was about those who own the means of production in a meaningful, some kind of level of control. And then you're talking about a much more concentrated group of people. So the fact that some of us own a little chunk, we don't have voting rights for this. It doesn't really significantly affect our behavior. It's certainly not there that the problem lies.
Can I respond to that if no one else is questioning?
Go ahead.
All right. I just say that around the world where you see that kind of poverty that he's talking about, it's in precisely those areas that reject the profit and loss system, reject economic freedom. And I disagree about the poor in America. If I was going to be poor in any country around the world, you could set a list. It's going to be all the Western nations that have developed economic freedom and the profit and loss system. The poor in America, you look at the statistics, 70% of them have air conditioning, most of them own cars, most of them have TVs, most of them have DVD players. The poor in America are better off than the vast majority of the world and the vast majority of all people throughout all of human history. And if I was going to be poor at any time in history or any place in history or in the world, it would be in America at this time.
My question is, if the government was to raise taxes on the corporate income, would they also automatically charge higher prices to the consumers? And then would this be an example of what you guys focus on, the disease that you guys described as
It's very relevant. It's actually quite relevant. Now in the budget, in Obama's budget, actually, there's some discussion about that. So totally the news in the last few days. One of the things is that the corporate tax rate actually in America is not particularly low. In fact, if you measure it ideally, it's relatively high for rich countries. Right? The problem is that the loopholes bump it down to an effective rate that is at the very bottom of all industrial countries. And again, my issue about comparing the poor in America was compared only to rich countries, of course. Naturally. Otherwise, I agree. But compared to other capitalist countries, it's much deeper. So would they? When they are monopolies, as indeed they increasingly are, yes, they would. They have the opportunity to pass along price increases because you don't have the competitive pressure. So again, the problem of the ideal capitalism versus the one in which we live. And perhaps I'm sure we both agree that we'd like to push it towards that direction. We have some other fundamental philosophical differences. I hope you see that we're quite friendly despite having vehement disagreement. That's nothing. It's more interesting, isn't it? It's boring to hang out with people that agree with you all the time.
Mind if I jump in?
Yes.
All right. I'd say that corporate taxes are some of the most regressive forms of taxation that we have. Look at the top corporations in the U.S. They serve regular people, including poor income people. Many of you have probably seen the Faces of Walmart website that makes fun of socially undesirable people that shop at Walmart. People look at that and laugh. I actually look at that and say, I am thankful Walmart is out there serving these socially undesirable people that the rest of us just sit there and laugh at. Walmart is out there serving them directly. And when you put on taxes, it's going to hurt on corporate taxes, it's going to be passed on to consumers. It's going to hurt the poorest the worst, because when they go out and buy bread, it's a larger percentage of their total budget than when a rich person goes out and buys bread. And then I'd also add out to that, income, when a rich person earns income, it's taxed at 36%. Then when they invest it in a company, the corporate tax is 35%. So that they earn the income, 36%, they invest it in a company, 35% is taken away. And then when they receive that income from the corporation, it's taxed at 15%. And then when that person dies, 50% of it is taken. Where in there are we not taxing them enough?
The loopholes. Nobody pays 35%. In fact, recently we know that some of the biggest corporations pay 0. And then there's income, which again in the news today, right? I like to tie things into current events. Right? Everybody made a big hoopla in the Republican primaries about Romney paying an effective tax of 15% despite being a multi-billionaire, while middle-class people pay typically 20. So again, interesting, no? We're learning something here. The ideal versus the de facto, often through government and other tricks that I've heard of.
So this is all hypothetically speaking. If I was to make a car that ran on air, groundbreaking, yes, and I charged 100 times what the production cost was, yet people were clamoring to buy it. Is that wrong with me, or should I be excluded?
Well, that leads me to this one. Good question. Well, first of all, personally, again, I'm not representing who am I representing exactly.
Can you restate the question first, because we're not hearing that right here.
Okay. I restate it. Extremely innovative good. Would it be ethical to get a massive profit rate off of that good? Basically, right? Okay. So, couple of things. Who made that monster innovation? So, for example, there is an element where where does that massive profit that we're evaluating here ethically go to? Does it go to the engineer, the company that invested on research and technology, or may it go evaporate into some IPO that only a few funds are invited to join, such as Facebook pretty soon? Used to be you're not invited to buy into it.
Let's just say it's a privately owned company.
A rarity, like
Chick-fil-A.
a rarity. First of all, that the privately owned. True. I think that it is an excellent example where massive returns for an extremely innovative technology is really not a problem ethically because of what the amazing benefit that it generates. However, having said that, since you're talking technology here, it allows me to add Microsoft, right? This is actually has been articulated by Bill Gates Sr. recently, who advocated for being taxed more. You know, he's one like Warren Buffett, only, I don't know, I think it's more interesting, especially because this is the guy who created wonderful products, technological products. And of course, think of all the technology, all that internet stuff, right? Important stuff. Let's not forget where it came from. Who developed the internet? Public fund, your tax money working, all entirely. Military. Who developed the basics, physics, electronics, to even begin to work on this sort of thing back in the 40s? Public universities funded by National Science Foundation. Right? Who built the highways on which my Amazon boxes come to my house on a regular basis? You see, Amazon, one of my favorite, Google and Amazon, favorite things. So what Bill Gates Sr. says is, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm successful, so is my son, we deserve to be filthy rich, and I agree. I agree with him because he is willing to give back something, at least recognizing that he used infrastructure that was bought by the 300 million Americans, and without it, couldn't have done it. So there's at least a necessity for fairness. You need some degree of sharing. Exactly how is tricky.
So it's not 15% of $1 trillion, the same thing as 15% of $37,000? That's not
What do you mean?
Of your income. Yeah.
What do you mean that? No, but the rates are different. You know, and it's worth. Yeah, I mean, you know, Romney's got billions. To use just the example that everybody was all on and on about, because not so much. But somebody doesn't even have a lot of activities are simply not taxed, or there are mass amounts of loopholes. In fact, in this way, I'll get to the right wing. I would like to see the tax system radically simplified, frankly. And that in many cases with very famous right wingers like Friedman and others, and a whole bunch. The current system makes it a joke because of the endless loopholes. Companies also now, you've heard all these accountant frauds. I mean, you can move profit off to offshore accounts and end up paying, really, the big corporations in America pay 0, not 15% like Roman. 0. Look it up. While the general population pays larger percentages of smaller, significantly smaller amounts. But we should focus on these loopholes that if you are powerful enough, you can get away with. And perhaps it's corporatism too. I mean, I think it is actually, that you allow it. In fact, right now what's going on is negotiating between Obama and corporate America, who rules, doesn't matter if it's Democrat or Republican, precisely they say, well, okay, we're willing to pay a higher corporate tax rate because it'll make us look good, and you too, Mr. President. So long as you keep the loopholes in place. And that's currently an argument. Because they're saying, okay, I'll pay 20%, doesn't matter, because anyway, I end up paying 0. I'll pay 30. No, it's generous. Because I know I have the loopholes to get rid of it all. So again, the ideal versus the actual what's going on is very important. Too often we get just pushed to the ideological ideals, and I really think it's almost like a conspiracy. In the back, somebody's going like, doesn't matter what you guys argue about. I'm getting my way.
I would argue that I completely agree with him on the loopholes. I said in my talk, I'm against giving special privileges to any businesses that need to compete on equal margins. So we both agree with that. But I want to focus, there's a lot on there I wanted to focus on, but I'm going to focus exclusively on the excessive profits. When cell phones came out, they were about $2,000, $3,000. There's these huge things. They barely worked. They weren't, like, no one knew really, there weren't that many cell phone engineers at that time. There weren't many cell phone towers, but they made a lot of profit off of very rich people. The very rich people buying those first cell phones defrayed the cost of investment into those technologies. And less than 15 years later, people had them in their hands for like 40, 50. You could buy a cell phone for 10 bucks from certain companies right now. If we had cut off those excessive profits, if we said as soon as the cell phone came out that you can't make those profits off of them, do you think all these engineers would have gone into the cell phone making business? Do you think people would have invested into cell phone towers to make it readily available for all of us? The luxuries of today quickly become the necessities of, or luxuries of tomorrow or yesterday quickly become the necessities of today. And that's happened throughout all of human history. At some point throughout human history, there's people standing outside, peasants standing outside a rich person's home and saying, I hear he uses a fork to eat. What godless, self-indulgent luxury. But quickly, because people invested in that technology, quickly invested in making those things, like knee replacement surgeries. Only the rich used to be able to afford those. Doctors moved into that field, we got technology, people moved in because of the high profits in those fields. They moved into that field, they developed technology to make it more readily affordable for people, and now it's a commonplace surgery. So if we curb those profits, that type of technology getting out to the people that the common people would not occur.
Directed at Dr. Professor Smith. You guys keep talking about how U.S. handles their profits. Is there anything that makes the U.S. unique to similar countries in the way they handle their profits?
All the subsidies over a really long time to make it happen. It's a special case. High-speed trains in France and Germany and more and more places. 15 years of losses covered by government. Much scandal, by the way. Even back then I was a little bit more skeptical and was screaming myself too over there. After 15 years, that amazing infrastructure zooming around at 300 miles per hour is beginning to generate very good profit, has been privatized, and ends up returning good returns to its initial investors. So some projects are so big, the profit is so far away, the costs are right now that private can do it in the right mind without some kind of guarantee. Now, another similar situation where you just have to be specific to the problem and kind of get beyond the ideology is precisely that Vegas example. It's a wonderful example, yeah, moral hazard we call it, right? And indeed, of course, we've seen the banksters